some of the tips on how to write good funding applications. And after that, I'll go through, round up some of the sort of latest funding opportunities. So basically, yeah, so we're going to look at things like, there's obviously with fundraising, there's a particular process that funders like to see in the applications, or the process they use in terms of the questions they use. So we cover things like the good elements required. Obviously, you need to understand concepts like output, outcomes, and impact, and you need to build a strong case for your support. Obviously, there's a number of different funding sources for grants. You've got, I think someone's got their microphone on. Getting a bit of background noise there. Yeah, so obviously you've got things like central government grants, local authorities, Housing Council's got its Thriving Communities Emergency Funds open at the moment. Obviously you've got things like National Lottery, local funders. It does mention Heathrow Community Trust Fund, but that's actually being closed at the moment because their money comes from Heathrow, and obviously that's been impacted by the COVID crisis. But then you've also got lots of other small trusts, just mentioned there, Garfield Western. Obviously I'm trying to promote a bit more of those because a lot of the very small trusts, they don't have much of a budget to promote themselves. So it's very much a case of you have to get to know them, find out about them. The good thing is that I think with some of the smaller trusts, they like to build up a long-term relationship. So there's always the opportunity, if you build a good relationship, they might renew funding to you. Obviously, there's things like businesses. We've got our own project called Hounslow Giving, trying to get a bit of funding from businesses. But you can also just try contacting them yourself. I know some groups have had success in sort of getting things like in-kind support from businesses. And obviously you can get things like from the public, donations, crowdfunding, that kind of thing. So the key thing to know about grants, obviously, is for funding for a specified activity over a specified time period. So even if you have an ongoing sort of service, when you're applying for a grant, you have to, unless it's a sort of just a general core grant, which is not often, normally you'd have to specify, you know, you're applying for a particular period of time. You could phrase it as a particular project over a specific time period, rather than just saying it's like ongoing for your pre-existing services. Because the other thing you have to bear in mind is that grant funders like to see new things, as opposed to describe things as a new project, as opposed to just saying, well, it's just for ongoing funding or just for continuing funding. So you would normally, you'd have to complete an application process, and if it's restricted funding, then you can only spend the grant money on the purposes specified in the application. And as I say, so there are some trusts that will give core costs. There's not very many of them, so most funding will be called restricted funding, and you can only spend it for the funding that you've specified in your grant application. And normally there'll be a question about budget, and you have to give in detail, specify in detail how you will spend the money. So you obviously got things like your national funders. So we've got National Lottery, obviously the biggest one, Children in Need, Sports England, these kind of things. Then like we said, we've got local funders. So we've got London-wide funders like the GLA, City Bridge Trust, Trust for London is another one. Then you've also got your Hounslow specific. So there's one called Inspire Hounslow, only fund groups in Hounslow. So the large fund is for groups working with disadvantaged young people in Hounslow up to the age of about 25. So it's quite specific. And obviously it's Hounslow only. Obviously you've got your local authority funding, Freshwater Foundation, another very small funder, only funds groups in Ealing and Hounslow. So then the first thing you need to check is your eligibility. So there's things like, how long has your organisation been operating? Sometimes there might be a restriction in terms of, well, you must have been in operation for a year or something. I think Hounslow Council, for example, their fund at the moment, they're saying you can be newly established. They don't have that requirement, but obviously different. Every trust, so every funder will be different. So you need to do that research on your eligibility. For example, if you've recently applied and failed, there might be a period of time before you can reapply. So you need to look into that. If you want to fund a one-off event, there might be a restriction on that. So some funders won't. I know things like the National Lottery will fund one-off events. Obviously, it's quite common these days, but it was before COVID rather, with things like festivals. Obviously, that's changing with what's happened. think about how when your project's going to, when you want your project to start, because you're going to have to think about how long the process will be to get your decision on your application. So previously the National Lottery was saying there needed to be a 12-week period. I think with COVID they've tried to be as quick as possible. So that's because they realise it's an emergency situation. So it's sort of changed a little bit, but normally that's still something you have to bear in mind as to how long the process will take. And then there could be things like restrictions on size of organisation. For example, some funds are limited to below £100,000 turnover, for example. Some might be above a certain amount. So you have to bear that in mind as to whether you're eligible. Yeah, so you need to look at also the type of your organisation. So are you a constituted organisation? Are you a registered charity? Some really strict funders will only fund registered charities, for example. Are you a not-for-profit company or community interest company? So when you say not-for-profit company, normally it's a company limited by guarantee. Or, for example, National Lottery, they'll fund community interest companies, but only those limited by guarantee. And then also, if you're a not-for-profit company, you've also got to think about, because you haven't got trustees, you need a management committee. So the National Lottery will say you must have a management committee, I think of at least 2 people. I think the council funding is saying you must have a management committee of at least 3 unrelated people. So that can be an issue, because I know some people have started a CIC and they're the only director, they're the only person on the management committee, and obviously that's not, doesn't make them not eligible. So check the status of your organisation. Bear in mind there's a difference between constituted groups and registered. So if you're a constituted charity organisation, that just means you've got a signed constitution. If you're a registered charity, that means you're actually registered with the Charity Commission, you've got a charity number. Because if you're a unincorporated charitable trust, for example, or unincorporated charitable organisation, then you don't have to register, or you can't register with the Charity Commission whose income goes above £5,000. Obviously, if you are something like a charitable incorporated organisation, then you have to register right from the start. So you're always a registered charity with a charity number. So then also bear in mind things like some trusts, some funders will actually fund individuals. So you don't even have to be part of an organisation. Like I said, so most funders won't fund CICs limited by shares. Also, I do have met some charities where the charity is based outside the UK and they want to run a project in England. And obviously, most restrictions will be you'd have to, the charity or organisation would actually have to be based in the UK. So that's something to bear in mind. And also things like, so the National Lottery is saying if you've already submitted an application and are waiting for a decision, then you can't apply until you've heard back on that decision. So sometimes funders will allow you to apply for funding at the same time, as long as they're different projects. So you have to bear that in mind. And also things like, so National Lottery, they won't accept applications on behalf of another organisation. So you can only apply on behalf of your organisation. Yeah, so be aware funders have their own criteria and areas of interest. So always be aware funders have got their own aims to achieve. So you need to make sure that your aims of your project align or fit in with the aims of the funder. So it's a good idea to read the guidance notes produced by the funder. Most funders will have guidance notes either on the website or somewhere. And it's a really good idea to read them, because they give you a lot of information about what you should put in there in terms of answering the questions. And also bear in mind things like it might be the right funder, but then funds have different funding streams as well. So make sure you're applying to the correct funding stream. Obviously, funding streams have changed a bit at the moment because a lot of them have become quite COVID specific. But even so, you still got to make sure you're. And I'd say if you have any doubts, obviously you can get in touch with me, but you can also get in touch with funders directly. Hounslow Council, for example, has got 2 dedicated officers to answer your questions, Michelle and Annie, I think. But most funders, if you have any queries about your eligibility and what is the correct funding stream, they would always say, you know, get in touch with them and get some feedback. So this is, yeah, at the moment, I said National Lottery has changed their criteria. Okay, thanks, Rena. So it's all become quite COVID specific. So they're saying the first criteria is organisations supporting people who are at high risk from COVID-19. The second one is organisations supporting communities that are most likely to face increased demand and challenges as a direct result of measures to prevent the result of COVID-19, and organisations with high potential to support communities with a direct and indirect impact of COVID-19. So you have to think about what your project, which one of those categories it would fit into, and why, and that you're going to have to explain how you're going to achieve that in your application. So another big thing they're very keen on nowadays is saying they'll have a question, things like how the people who have been involved in your project, how they've been involved in the design, for example, the design and delivery of the project. They want to say, so National Lottery is saying things like your project or activity is led by people. So funders are very much keen on, they don't want it just to be like a top-down approach that you've thought up your project and you're just coming along and imposing on people. They want to hear how you've consulted with people, so you can say you've had things like focus groups, surveys, questionnaires, one-to-one over the phone, that kind of thing. Obviously, in the past, I mean, you could say focus groups, you could run things like now, obviously, with COVID, you could say you run focus groups on like Zoom, Skype, Teams, that kind of thing. Obviously, I'll send you the slides, and there's a link to a little video you can watch, which gives you an idea on the National Lottery website there. And so, for example, this is the Hounslow Council Thriving Communities. These are the criteria they want to meet in their fund. So it's things like promoting and enabling digital inclusion, unemployment or underemployment as a result of the coronavirus, improving mental health, projects for young people, developing a sustainable response to food insecurity. So you just have to make sure that you're fulfilling one of those areas the council want to meet in your application. As I mentioned, Heathrow Community Trust, so they had normally they would have 4 different funding strands, so projects for young people, environment and sustainability grants, communities together, local development grants. So again, you have to read the guidance notes, see which of the category would best suit you, your project, and like I say, if you have any doubts, get in touch with the funder and explain your situation. So there'll typically be a question in your application on the background of your organisation. This is just to explain what your organisation is, what the size of it, what kind of activities, projects you've run in the past. Because I mean, you want to give reassurance to the funder that you're an organisation that's capable of delivering the project you say you're going to. So I've got a hypothetical example here of like just a short paragraph summarising what an organisation has done. So saying the Cycle Circus was established in 2010 to improve overall health and well-being through cycling. So saying how old the organisation is, what its activities are. We deliver several projects involving cycling, targeting all age groups and people from all backgrounds, reaching out to approximately 1,000 cyclists a year in West London. So by giving an indication of how many service users or participants there have been, you're giving an idea of how big the projects have been. We use group cycling activities as a means to improve people's physical fitness and combine this with elements of group participation to increase people's social well-being. We also provide activities that highlight and lobby for cycle safety, as well as promoting cycling in general as a cost-effective mode of transport for all. So they've given sort of an indication of what the project activities are, what the aims are, what the projects have achieved. And as you can see, it's not a huge number of words, so it's quite succinct. And always bear that in mind with your project, with your applications, there'll be word limits on your application form, so you have to sort of write as succinctly as possible to the point, because you want to keep it, just basically convey as much information as possible. So this is an example of how you would describe a previous project. So 12 proficiency training sessions for over 200 children and young people aged 10 to 16 who lack cycling confidence throughout West London. So the key thing there is you've got number of training sessions, number of people who took part, who the beneficiaries were, their age range, so young people aged 10 to 16. And then another example is a 16 cycling tour, so people of all ages across urban and green spaces with participation from over 200 people throughout West London annually. So then again, you've got number of sessions, age group, number of people who took part, where it took place. So another thing you'll probably have to include in your application would be a short outline of your project. So you, for example, here we've got a hypothetical example will be weekly activities involving 30 mental health service users to improve their physical and mental well-being through participation in group activity in Hounslow. So you've got the information, how often the sessions will be, how many people, how many service users will be taking part, what the aim of the session will be, and where it will take place. So you've got a huge amount of information, but in a very short few number of words. So as I was saying, with activities, you need to have that level of detail about what you're going to be doing in your project. So description of the activity, the number of sessions, approximate number of people who will be taking part. Now, obviously, you can't necessarily know for definite, but you need to give some kind of estimate, because that gives, you're telling the funder that with this X amount of money, X number of people will be supported. So it gives an idea of how many, how well used the money is going to be. A brief description of the beneficiaries, so just saying why they need support, where will it take place, and you might be a question on things like milestones, so dates for key achievements. So if you were, for example, if you were going to teach 200 people to ride a bike, then you might say, and say the project lasts 6 months, and you might say by third month, 100 people will be have achieved the target of being able to ride a bike. That would be an example of a key milestone. So as we go, we've got examples of how you would write your proposed activity. So 3 times 8 week block of cycling sessions, 24 weeks total, a 10 to 12 mental health service users around Hounslow's green spaces, 30 to 36 users total. So within that, you've got number of sessions, total time period it will take place, number of mental health users or service users per session, and then how many in total. So this is also a good idea. If you're delivering sessions, think about how many, whether they're going to be repeat attendees, or they'll just be attending one session alone. So for example, if you're running 10 sessions and you had like 10 people, but it was the same 10 people attending all 10 sessions, and obviously you've only got 10 users in total. But if you've got 10 new users every session, then obviously you've got a total different figure of 100. So that's quite a big difference. Our cycling sessions will be delivered by British Cycling Level 2 certified instructors. So if you are having sessions being led by anybody, it's always a good idea to talk about what qualification they have, what accreditation they have, if they have any, because that gives an indication that they know what they're talking about. That the sessions will be, delivered to a high level. And then it goes on to say what the sessions will cover. So 10-point check on cycle safety, using gears and brakes effectively, learning to cycle up and downhill, practicing left-right indicators of one outstretched arm. So it's a good idea to go into a bit of detail if you're running sessions, go into detail about what they will cover, because that gives an idea of there's going to be progression, you're giving an idea to the funder that you know what you're going to be doing. It's all planned. So other examples, 2 times 8-week block of road cycling sessions for 15 to 18 mental health service users. So again, we're giving the idea number of sessions, number of people who will be taking part. So you might have heard of the term outcome. So basically your outcome, your output is the activity you're going to be running. The outcome is the anticipated difference that your project will make, which will be similar to your overall aim. And so this must come out of what's called your evidence of need. So you must have proved that the need for your project is there, and then your projects are going to make the difference to meet that need. So, and it's always, so for example, if you were saying you've done research, you found in one particular area of Hounslow there's a very high number of people who don't speak English. You've done the research, and then obviously to meet that need of being able to people to speak English, you would run a number of sessions, or teaching classes, so the classes would make the difference that people would be able to speak English. So it's always a good idea in your describing your outcomes, what you use words of change. So for example, more, less, reduced, increased. So it would say in that example, more people speak English. If you wanted to lose weight, you would say, people will have reduced their weight by X amount. If you're talking about people becoming more physically active, people will have increased their physical activity levels by X amount. If they were like, if you were looking at people's well-being, mental health, you could talk about improving their mental health, improving their, so always use those key words of change to describe your outcomes. So as I was saying before, your outputs, these are basically the activities you're going to be doing. So always bear in mind, you're not doing an activity for its own sake. You're doing an activity, be it meetings, sessions, classes, whatever, to bring about a change. And that's to bring about an outcome. So this is the change that's going to result. And then the impact, this is kind of like, so quite often with funding applications, there will be a question about impact. Impact is a bit vaguer. It's kind of like the broader or longer term effects of a project, outputs of a project. So we'll come on to some examples here. So if you were talking about one example here, we've got, so the output, for example, would be 3 volunteering workshops delivered. So that, but the workshops are the outputs. The outcome of that is that 20 young people have higher awareness of the benefits of volunteering. And then the impact would be young people engaged in positive action for their communities. Another one would be something like greater community cohesion. And obviously things like measuring that is a bit more difficult. But you would, it's just thinking about the sort of the wider, longer term impacts that your project's going to have. So another example would be 400 people take part in sporting activities. That would be an output. An outcome of that would be beneficiaries regularly participate in physical activity. And then the wider impact of that would be improved community health. Another output, 25 ex-offenders attend weekly mentoring and coaching for a minimum of 6 weeks. The outcome of this would be the participants or beneficiaries have greater self-confidence. And then the wider impact of that would be things like lower rates of reoffending, safer neighbourhoods. Another output, for example, 50 people trained in public speaking. Beneficiaries have improved life skills. Well, you could also say things like increased confidence, increased communication skills. And then the impact of that would be things like lower unemployment rates. An output, for example, could be a new website established. Outcome of that would be local people have better access to information about local services and support. And then a wider impact would be improved mental health in the community. Another output would be, say, creation of a new community garden. The outcome of that would be local residents work together on a shared project. And then a wider impact could be more attractive and environmentally friendly public spaces. So as I mentioned before, you need to think about, there's always going to be a question about evidence of need. You know, why is a project needed? What research have you done? You need to use a mixture of what's called qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative is basically like things like statistics, and ideally sort of officially produced statistics. And then quantitative is a bit more about people's sort of opinions. So you can use things like case studies, surveys. So you can do these things yourself. You can, do, like I said before, do your own surveys with your potential project participants. If you've run a similar projects in the past, you could always use feedback you've had from that. Another good idea is things like, say you running a little pilot project, so you could run things on a small scale, get feedback from participants on that, and then use that as an evidence to say, well, we ran the project on a small scale, this was the feedback, participants said they really needed it, they enjoyed it, they found it useful, and the need is there to produce it on a large scale. Yes, as I said, it's a qualitative, it's evidence of the people or possibly even other organisations wanting to see the project take place and acknowledge that there is a need for the project. So you can't just state that there's something vague, for example, like there's a group of people suffering hardship. You need to have some kind of like real evidence for that. Funders want to see that the needs really exist. So, for example, looking at but painting a picture of the need, you've got to assume that the funder doesn't know anything about the borough or the area you're applying to. You need to describe who the client group are, who are the people who are going to benefit, what are the issues that they face, and what you're going to do to counter these. Where is it taking place? So, be specific. Is it Hounslow borough-wide? Is it one particular area of Hounslow? Is it Feltham? Is it one particular estate? Why are they facing these issues? Is it poverty? Is it that kind of thing? So outlining your needs. What is the need your work is addressing? Sorry, I've just got to plug my laptop in with battery. Yeah, so who are the ultimate beneficiaries? What difference will it make? Look at things like who else, other organisations are doing similar work. If there are other organisations doing similar work, could you partner with them? Because you've always got to bear in mind, funders, they don't want to fund duplicate work. So if there is another organisation that's doing similar work, meeting a similar need, same need as you've identified, then you need to explain why you're not why you're not working in partnership, because they don't want to fund things that are already being funded. Who in the voluntary sector can be partner agencies? What capacity building do they need? Things like is the need expected to increase or change over the years? So a good one for that would be things like older, isolated people. We know that the population as a whole is aging. There's going to be more older people in the future, so we know that that need is not going to go away. Things like, is the need an ongoing social need, or is it occasional financial need? So a good source of qualitative data in Hounslow is something called the Hounslow Insight website. This is actually produced by the council. Councils, local authorities do a lot of their own research. They have analysts, obviously, to look at how the needs of the community are going to change and how the council can meet those needs. So if you just type in Hounslow, I'll circulate the slides. I'll just show you now how to it's got something quite useful where you can get a borough profile. assuming it works. So basically, it's got lots of data from different official sources. So you can go to reports on the left. Obviously, if you've got any issues with any of your research issues, like using these websites, just get in touch with me and I can go through it with you on Zoom or something. So you can click on here, you can go to Hounslow Borough Profile. You'll download it as a Word document. And then it's got lots of key information on different areas. So we've got population, education skills, vulnerable groups, economy, housing, access to transport, health and well-being, crime and safety. So it's quite useful there where they turn things into graphs, because obviously if you just look at raw data sets, they're just Excel spreadsheets, so they can be quite difficult to look at those and get trends, identify trends from that. But they've turned some of the information here into key information into a bit more digestible formats. And obviously it's got things like where the source of these things are. So it's always a good idea if you have statistical information, say what the source is. So here they put census 2011. Obviously there's issues in terms of the census because it's only every 10 years. So by now the last census is very out of date. But in terms of population, you can use things like the Greater London Authority population estimates. So I'll go on to that in a minute because there's something called the London Data Store produced by the GLA, which is a website which has lots of information produced by them. So you can use population estimates in the meantime because the census is so out of date. You can also do a ward boundary, a ward profile. So same thing, if you find a particular ward you're looking for, you'll produce a similar report for your ward. So you might have to do a bit of research in terms of what projects the ward is taking place in. And then it will also go down to, I think, even smaller areas. So you've got GP localities, the LSOA area. So that's a lower, it's called the lower super output area. And so they basically break down they've actually broken down the whole of England, I think, and Wales into areas about 1,500 people. So you can get down to really sort of what they call granular level in terms of information if you want to get down to the real local level. Yeah, you can also just, on this website, you can just go through different data sets. So you just click, for example, on that and it should bring up different data. I will actually do a slightly longer session just on research tools in the future, so I'll let you know when that's happening. But at the same time, yeah, so we can go on to London Data Store website. So this is produced by the Greater London Authority. So you just literally type in the data store. And they've got a similar thing. If you go to area profiles, you should then bring up a map of London. And if you click on Hounslow, it's got some general information here already about population. But if you click, you can click on a report for Hounslow. And there's a similar thing where we've got some key areas, say population. So you can see there, for example, the GLA population estimate for Hounslow in 2018 was 278,264. So this official it's an official source, so you can always use that in your funding, as a reference in your funding application. Just put things like brackets GLA. And then you can see how it compares, population size compares to other London boroughs. Things like age group breakdown, projections, ethnic makeup, economy, employment, housing, education, deprivation, crime rates. I mean, yeah, the thing to bear in mind, crime rates do change quite quickly because I think they get updated sort of every 3 months. So always be aware of how often statistics get updated. So we know, like I said before, with census data, they're only updated every 10 years. But you can always, the general rule would be to try and get the most up-to-date figures you can, basically. And you can also just do a general search of like data. So you can go to search with data and then try and find something if you're a particular sort of data source you're looking for. So you're looking for something about young people not in educational training. You can find a data set produced by the Department for Education. It says created 6 years ago, updated 8 months ago. Just click on the spreadsheet. It should, yeah, come up. Like I said, obviously with the spreadsheet, it's slightly more complicated to navigate, but you could be able to find and obviously you know how to, if you have the data, the figures, you can always create your own graphs on the spreadsheet. So we've got something on our Hounslow Hub website called Hounslow Stats Bank, which is currently being updated. Hounslow Health, or something called the JSNA, Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. So all local authorities produce something called the JSNA every few years. Basically, it's to help for them to sort of look at how their needs for the borough are going to change, particularly in relation to health and well-being. So that's a good source of information. And obviously, for things like if you're applying to the council, if you can use their own statistics that they produce themselves, that's going to be quite persuasive. You can also use something called Public Health England health profiles. So likewise, if you just go into something like Google, you can type in local authority health. Local authority health profiles. And then it should just type in Hounslow, for example. And then you can do the same thing, download a report. And then it's got information about health aspects, life expectancy, child health, inequalities. So that's quite easy to navigate. Yeah, Trust for London. So Trust for London is a funder, but it also has its own information, particularly in relation to things like poverty and housing. They have updated this recently, so it's slightly different to how it used to be, because it used to have quite good things where you could compare boroughs with each other. But it's a good source, so you can look at different topics, so things like housing. It's got reports there as well. Things like number of people sleeping rough. And obviously, if you were going to apply to Trust for London, if you used information they've produced themselves, that's going to be quite persuasive to them. Yeah, boroughs, I think you'd be able to compare boroughs. So if you wanted to go to Hounslow, it will give you an overview of Hounslow, key findings. how it relates to other boroughs. Obviously, there are other, it's got some other data sets on there as well. Obviously, Office for National Statistics is probably the most comprehensive sort of official department, government department for statistics. The website is quite difficult to navigate, so really all the information you need on ONS is probably on London Data Store website anyway. So I'd probably recommend going through the London Data Store website. It's a bit easier to navigate. So yeah, in terms of officially produced statistics, like I said, you've got things like the census, so that's going to be about update by now. Things like labour market data, educational data. You know, most government departments produce information. You can also look for things like, you know, research papers. In terms of your own particular data, you can produce things, although this wouldn't sort of be officially produced, but you could do things, you know, online, polls, face-to-face, service user feedback. So it's a good idea to use a mixture of both. Are there any other organisations working in your area of interest? So, for example, are there NGOs, charities, or lobbying groups, academic papers, policy think tanks? Google, just type stuff into Google and see what happens, what you find. You could even, you know, try picking up the phone, talking to local experts, people in the council, or anybody else you think might be an expert. So basically, I've got an example here of how you could incorporate evidence of need. So this project has been devised for people experiencing mental health issues, as we believe physical group activity delivered in a mental health friendly environment can significantly improve people's overall well-being. So we're saying the first example, Cycle Circus successfully delivered 4-week pilot sessions in 2017 for 8 social housing tenants experiencing low to moderate mental health issues who all reported improved well-being. Now this is an example of how you've done your own pilot session. You do your own pilot session, then you can use that evidence from that session as evidence for a sort of a bigger project. Based on academic research, guidance from the Royal College of Psychiatrists states that people undertaking regular, moderate and enjoyable physical activity report better well-being. So that's an example of academic research being used as evidence. Low mental health causes morbidity in 1 in 6 and 1 in 10 adults and children, respectively, in Ealing, often associated. Actually, this should have been, it's hypothetical, but it's kind of mixing up Ealing and Hounslow, but okay, thanks for that. Despite this, Hounslow Council spends less on mental health than the London average. Now that's hypothetical, but that's just an example of how another source of information, comparing brothers to each other, and that's an example of how they're saying it came from a JSNA. Analysis of data from mental health providers, both from the statutory sector and the VCS, informed us that over 90% of mental health service users experience low self-esteem and confidence in general, where structured personal development activities can be used to negate this. So this is data from a survey which the organisation ran itself. So you can use that. So it's just an example of how you've got 4 different types of evidence in application. And there'll normally be a question about budget. So you'll have to give a cost of how much your budget will cost. How much are you requesting from the funder? So for example, if the total cost of your project is £20,000, but the funding you're applying for is 10,000 max, then there might be a question of, well, how are you going to fund the difference? How are you going to get the extra £10,000? There might be a question of things like, how do you show added value? So added value in terms of the voluntary sector, things like volunteer time. So if you had to pay all the volunteers something like the London Living Wage, how much would that cost? So that's a good way of calculating added value. You might be offering things like apprenticeships, employment opportunities, gifts in kind. Does your maths add up? It's always a good idea to double check figures, just make sure you've got no mistakes in there, because obviously if there are mistakes, it doesn't really give the funder any confidence. If you've got money secured from elsewhere, then you might need to have a supporting letter just to show that that money has been secured. And then there will often be a question about monitoring. So how are you going to monitor your project? How are you going to make sure that you're actually going to do what you say you're going to do? So things like attendance registers can be used. Say you wanted to measure physical health improvements, and you could have an assessment at the beginning of the project, an assessment at the end of the project, measure the difference. Similar thing with mental health. You can have some kind of questionnaire. In terms of like well-being, there's a famous one called the Edinburgh-Warwick questionnaire to measure well-being. You can do it at the start, at the end, but there's lots of other questionnaires you can use as well. You might want to use things like case studies to give you a bit of qualitative monitoring data. Obviously, things like statistics, so like attendance will be quantitative. You could use things like surveys, photos. With things like smartphones, it's very easy to get people to do video testimonials. It's a good idea to talk about things like continuous assessment, that you'll monitor and evaluate your project throughout the project. While you won't just wait to the end and then monitor it and evaluate it, you'll do it throughout. Evaluation is kind of, so monitoring is measuring what's happened. Evaluation is sort of you looking at it and thinking, well, what's worked, what hasn't worked. So I'd always recommend saying things like you'll be open to a sort of continuous evaluation and assessment throughout the length of the project. Yeah, so this is just an example of some awards for all questions. Obviously they've changed a bit. I think it's still about the main sort of questions about 500 words. I think still they're trying to keep it quite short still. This is just an example of some questions. So, for example, that Heathrow Community Trust was using. So, you know, how many people will be involved in the project? So, you know, how many services are going to benefit? Are there any other partners involved? How will people benefit? How are you going to measure that benefit? You know, they're saying measurable breakdown. How do you know the project is needed? So that's what I'm saying about you use that combination of the sort of the local, specific, and then more the general statistical information I was talking about. I also got another question here. What is your long-term plan to maintain the resource of project in the future? So there you can talk about things like other funding. Sorry, I've just got to let something out the window. There's a big bee up there. Yeah, so it's just so say if you've got any other sort of source of income lined up, or if not, you can say you apply to other funders. You will use all possible resources to try and keep the project going. Yeah, so we've got an impact. How will the project have lasting impact? So that's a kind of impact question we were talking about before. In this particular funder, they're talking about things like issues about community cohesion. So that's a kind of impact question as well. This particular fund is also interested in environmental impact, so you'd have to think about that aspect of things as well. Describe your experience and capacity to deliver the project. So that's a sort of capacity question. So you'd have to talk about the history of your organisation in terms of what projects it's delivered, the size of them. How are you going to recruit target participants or beneficiaries to your project? So a lot of times people have questions about how are you going to promote your project? How are you going to get people involved? So you can always use methods of communication, like if you have a website, do you use social media, do you use Twitter, WhatsApp, Instagram. You can also, you could use just even things like putting leaflets up around places. Hounslow Council has a e-news called Evolve, which goes out to VCS sector groups. So you could always get in touch with them and see if they can promote it for you. Likewise, I do an e-news, so if you send information to me, I can help circulate it. So you could always say in your application form, you'll use appropriate e-newses, from the council and using Hounslow CVS to promote it to other voluntary sector groups and people in the borough. Likewise, we also have a website and Twitter account, so you can say how I would promote it that way as well. Yeah, so this is an example of the thriving communities questions.
Sorry, Ian, I have to leave for another meeting. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'll circulate the slides afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so in summary, think about who is the project for, who will benefit, why is the project needed, what evidence of need you have, how are you best placed as an organisation to address the need, do you have the expertise to run the projects, to do the activities? I was saying about what the accreditation does the person leading the project have, what the changes that are going to come about. So like I said before, ensure you fully read the guidance notes. Make sure you're answering the question, not just giving information that you want to. Double check the funder's interests and criteria. It's always a good idea to do your draft application in Word rather than put it straight on an online format or anything like that. And like I said, you can also send me your Word document for feedback. Check the word character count. Do a spell check. It's also a good idea perhaps to use things like formatting bullet points to make it a bit easier to read for the funder. Have someone else look at it. Don't make use of unintroduced acronyms. Do not give unsupported evidence. So ideally there should be some kind of if it's hard statistical information, like where has it come from? What's the official source? Yeah, another one is bidding for what you want to do rather than what's being funded. As I was saying before, you have to make sure you align with what you want to do with what the funder wants to do. Assuming prior knowledge, so don't assume that they know anything about Hounslow or you as an organisation. Yeah, so as I say, you can get in touch with me for any particular support in that respect. Now I'm just going to go through some of the local or the other funding opportunities you can apply for at the moment. So obviously you've got the Thriving Communities Council, Thriving Communities Hounslow Response Fund is still open. So the key areas they're looking for, as I said before, the digital capacity, providing support for victims of domestic abuse and violence, information, advice and guidance, addressing unemployment and underemployment. There's two streams available, so there's connection and recovery. So connection funding is up to £10,000. Deadline for this is 31st of August. And this is if you want to deliver a project or service that will help to address a short-term need because of the coronavirus. It's got full guidance notes there, so as I was saying before, it's a good idea to read the guidance notes. They're hoping to take 4 weeks to process applications. Get in touch with Ellie or Michelle for them to send you an application. It's got a link on the slides to, I'll circulate the slides as well. It's got a link on the slides to projects that are already funded. The recovery strand, so they're saying you should apply for the recovery fund to invest in services, delivering services that will enable the long-term recovery of your organisation and communities. The deadline for this is 3rd of August, so there will be further rounds. So there'll be a round 2 will close on 2nd of November, and then there'll be a further round 3 closing on the 25th of January 2021. The funding is up to £50,000. And again, get in touch with Ellie or Michelle for them to send you an application form. So they are saying they will fund constituted not-for-profit organisations, so you don't have to be a registered charity. And if you are an unconstituted group, such as a mutual aid group, then get in touch with them to discuss. So they're providing some information in terms of myth busting. So I won't get funding from the council if I received other funding, saying this is untrue. If you do get funding from the council, you can still apply for other funding. They will actually fund new organisations, so you don't have to be you don't have to have that track record or been around for a certain period of time. So the Coronavirus Community Support Fund. So this is central government funding, but it's being administered by National Lottery. So this has got 2 key objectives. So to increase community support to vulnerable people affected by the COVID-19 crisis, to reduce temporary closures of essential charities and social enterprises. There's a link on the slide for more information, but basically they're areas that priority are organisations supporting people and communities who experience disproportionate challenge and difficulty as a result of the coronavirus crisis. And this category includes, so there's older people, disabled people, BAME communities, or also organisations who provide advice. The second category is organisations providing services and support for vulnerable people, for which there will be a increased demand as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. So this category includes, for instance, organisations supporting people and families who face financial hardship as a result of the pandemic. Also includes organisations working to prevent domestic abuse and violence. And they're also going to support mental health support and loneliness and isolation. The final one is organisations which connect communities and support communities to work together to respond to COVID-19. This category includes organisations supporting local community activity, and they're also going to support BAME infrastructure organisations and other marginalised communities. So national lottery funding. So the national lottery funding is funding that central government funding, but it's also got its own funds available, which at the moment are all COVID specific, and they follow the same criteria as ones I've just mentioned. I'd say the application process is quite short. You can do it online or via paper. You've also got the Heritage Emergency Fund. So the deadline for that is 31st of July. The GSK Impact Award, deadline for this is the 14th of September. Something called the Youth Futures Fund. It's in partnership with BBC Children in Need. So this is grants up to £80,000 for projects working with young people aged 10 to 24. And there's more information on the slide. The funding opportunities supporting refugees, asylum seekers or migrants. Deadline for this is the 2nd of August. And there are £5 million to distribute to work that will relieve hardship caused by the pandemic among refugees and asylum seekers. Something else called the COVID-19 Homelessness Response Fund. So this is also funded by the National Lottery. 3rd of August is the first deadline, and there's also one on the 14th of September. Community Justice Fund. So this is a joint initiative to help specialist social welfare legal advice. You can find a link on the slide. Social Enterprise Support Fund, also funded by the National Lottery. Grants to support social enterprises during COVID-19. COVID-19 Community-Led Organisations Recovery Scheme. So the deadline of this, it's open for a short period on Tuesday the 28th of July between 10 and 1. So you have to apply within that period. And there's another round on the 4th of August and the 11th of August. And this is aimed at BAME community-led businesses. COVID-19 Emergency Surplus Food Grant, Phase 2 is now open for applications. So this is for not-for-profit food redistributors. Grants of between £5,000 and £10,000 to redistribute surplus food from retailers. Like I said, the deadline for this is 28th of August. The Wave 3 of the London Community Response Fund is now open. So they've got grants, small grants up to £10,000, large grants up to £50,000, and this is for up to 6 months of your work. They've got 3 strands, so crisis, enable and adapt. So make sure you're applying under the correct funding stream. And they're saying the funding can be used for things like people, support, equipment, resources, services, overheads, partnership development. There's no actual deadline, but I would just recommend applying as quickly as possible because they're talking about taking applications under this wave by the end of July.
Which one are they, Kian?
Sorry?
Which one are they? The one you were just talking about?
London Community Response Fund.
Okay. Yeah.
So
okay.
The third wave.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that.
Okay. So Tesco Bags of Help. So they've got a program for awards up to £500. So the areas they're looking at is things like increased demand, disrupted services, and new services. There's more information on the slides. The Charity Survival Fund. So they're £10 million available, open to UK registered charities. And the work in the areas of health and wellbeing, welfare and education, arts and culture. Deadline for that is 27th of July. COVID-19 emergency surplus food grant. So that's to assist surplus food distributors. You can see a link on the slide. CAF Coronavirus Emergency Fund. So you can get more information on the link on the slides. AB Charitable Trust. So they particularly welcome applications from charities working to support migrants, refugees and asylum seekers, criminal justice and penal reform, human rights, particularly access to justice. And the deadline for that is the 31st of July. The Ford Britain Trust. So this is the Ford Motor Group. Small grants up to £250, large grants over £250. Deadline for that is the 31st of July. Something called the Golson-Cott Foundation. So they're aiming to promote, maintain, improve and advance the education of the public in relation to the arts particularly. Deadline for that is 31st of July. The Worshipful Company of Weavers Benevolent Fund. Their priorities are supporting offenders and ex-offenders, helping disadvantaged young people. Deadline 31st of July. People's Postcode Trust. Funding up to 12 months. Deadline is the 14th of August. And if you go to the link, you'll be able to read some more. Masonic Charitable Foundation. So as well as financial grants to individuals and families, also grants to specific items or services. And you can also, the deadline there is 14th of August. Architectural Heritage Fund, deadline is 31st of July. Current priorities, support people, communities and organisations to take ownership, repair and adapt historic buildings, to attract more investment for the conservation and sustainable reuse of the UK's architectural heritage. And you can find more information on the slide. So I don't know if any organisation has been involved in Hounslow Model City. They've been working in sort of Heston area of the borough. So it's a sort of partnership approach with Laureus and the Mayor of London. But if there's any groups been involved in that, they can apply for funding up until the 31st of July, round 1, and 28th of August in round 2. As I said before, Heathrow Community Trust has been paused. Comic Relief, so grants available for small grassroots groups and charities in England. Look at the 4 strategic themes are children survive and thrive, fighting for gender justice, a safe place to be, and mental health matters. but your income must be under 250k. So you click on this slide for information. As I said before, so Freshwater Foundation is a very small local funder. So if you're working in Ely Hounslow, get in touch with them, and they'll see if they're interested. YAP Charitable Trust. So they work with older people, children, young people aged 5 to 25. Also people with physical impairments, social welfare, education, learning. And actually quite unusual because they will fund core funding. So link on the slide. The Field Family Charitable Trust. So any groups, any projects working with young people between the ages 13 to 25 or older people, the elderly. Deadline 15th of August. As I mentioned before, Inspire Hounslow. So they're a small, they're only fund groups in Hounslow. The main fund is for groups working with disadvantaged young people up to about 25. But they also have smaller grants for projects, any projects, up to £500. So you can always, they recommend just giving them an email just to find out if it's worth making an application if they like your project. Catalyst Housing Emergency Fund. So they've set up an emergency fund up to £2,000. Just make sure you're in one of the Catalyst neighbourhoods, so make sure you're eligible. Jack Petchey Foundation. So it's for young people projects working with young people aged 10 to 21. If you sign up for their Jack Petchey Award Scheme, you'll then be eligible to apply for small grants of up to £750. The Woodward Charitable Trust. They will fund core costs in areas in terms of outreach, children, young people, disability projects, disadvantaged women, disadvantaged families, prisoners, ex-offenders. And the next deadline is 31st of July. Henry Smith Charity. So grant size is £20,000 to £60,000 for 1 to 3 years to cover running costs, salaries and projects. Cadent Foundation, so 2 different funding streams. If you're funding it below the smaller funding stream, you have to have a Cadent employee sponsorship, but not for the funding stream 5 to £100,000. Austin and Hope Pilkington Trust. So their priority for this deadline of the 31st of July is for projects working with people aged 60 and over, addressing their particular needs in relation to COVID-19 and particularly for the BAME community. And you can apply for up to £1,000. Oliver Ford Charitable Trust. So funding is available for housing, educational training facilities for children, young persons or adults who have learning disabilities or learning difficulties. And you have to write to them by post, with details on the slide. Karen Keating Foundation is for charities working in the cancer area, so individuals and families affected by cancer, and you have to apply in writing, and so it's a website link on the slide. Waitrose Community Matters. So lots of supermarkets, like we said, Tesco's already have funding available for branches. So Waitrose scheme has £1,000 or £500 for community shops to share out between 3 local good causes each month. So there's more information on the slide. So another one is the ASDA Foundation. So they've got a hygiene grant up to £500, healthy holiday grant for groups holding summer activities to provide children with a hot meal. That's also £500 max. Boscia Hinton Foundation. So their aim is to improve quality of life for people with disabilities or learning difficulties and their families. A link on the slide. Another supermarket, Morrison's, currently have a homeless support fund. Archer Trust, so grants of between £500 and £4,000 to provide aid or support to a defined group of needy or deserving people. The Marsh Christian Trust, funding for core running costs and also for project working under arts and heritage, education training, environmental causes, animal welfare, healthcare and social welfare. Like I said before, they said they'd like to build long-standing relationships with grantees. So if you can work with these smaller trusts, you might be able to build a longer-term relationship. And they offer funding of £300 to £2,000. Link on the slides again. Bearing Foundation, so they will support legal action related to COVID-19. Open to all registered charities, grants of up to £40,000 per year, for 1 year rather. Next deadline is Tuesday 11th of August. The Lawrence Atwell charity, so they will fund young people who are not in employment, education or training to help them into meaningful work. Grants up to £10,000 per year are available. Next deadline, 9th of October. Skinner's Benevolent Trust, so up to £250 for individuals and families to purchase essential household items. But the applications can only be made on behalf of the individual by a support agency, which includes local charities. But individuals must be facing things like mental health challenges, be in recovery from substance abuse, alcohol use, be a victim of domestic violence, in receipt of a state retirement pension or physical disability or chronic illness. And there's more information on the slide. The Lady Neville charity, so capital grants for arts and heritage projects, or any charitable activity in key areas of interest, which includes Hounslow. So the charity's annual turnover must not exceed £100,000, and the total project cost should be no more than £10,000. And the next deadline is Friday, the 11th of September. The Esme Fairburn Collection Funds, so funding for museums, galleries and heritage organisations of between £20,000 and £120,000 for up to 3 years. The Percy Bilton Charity, grant making trust and company limited by guarantee. So funding for work with disadvantaged young people, people with disabilities, and older people. The Wakeham Trust, grants to help people rebuild their communities, particularly in terms of neighbourhood projects, community art projects, community service by young people. Warburtons, so they will support charities or community grants up to £250, and for projects that are within 15 miles of a bakery or depot site, they will fund between £1,000 and £10,000. So Wilkinson's is another shop which has funding for local projects, so you can read more on the link. Barchester Healthcare Foundation, so registered charity that helps older people and adults with a disability. You can apply for £100 up to £5,000. Old Possums Practical Trust, so this is grants available for literary, artistic, musical and theatrical projects. Paul Hamlin Foundation, Social Justice, support for marginalised individuals to communities to become integrated. That one deadline's passed. Battle, so they will fund projects working with children and young people. Lord Taverner's minibuses, so if you're looking for specially adapted minibuses. Family Fund, so they provide grants for families raising disabled or seriously ill children and young people. Creative England production funding, open to networks supporting delivery of peer-to-peer support, mentoring, training and advice. The Reach Fund provides grants to charities and social enterprises to help them raise social investment. Foyle Foundation, small grants to support charities with a turnover of less than £100,000, but no deadlines for submission. Woodroff Benton Foundation, so provides grants to officially recognised charities working in areas of relief of persons in need, hardship or distress, care and accommodation for the sick and elderly. The Variety Youth Club Programme, so they will support young people by supporting youth clubs. Charles Hayward Foundation, so small grants up to £25,000 for projects which are preventative and steer young people away from offending. Only registered charities can apply for that. Art Funds, Response and Reimagine grants. So UK public museums, galleries, historic houses, libraries and archives can apply for grants up to £50,000. The deadline is 17th of August. I think 22nd, we missed that one. Aviva Community Fund, so funding up to £50,000 to build more connected, more resilient communities. Deadline is 28th of July. Steel Charitable Trust, so registered charities working in areas of arts and culture, education, environment and health. Next deadline is 29th of July. The Chapman Charitable Trust, so for work in areas promoting physical and mental well-being, conserving natural environment, increasing accessibility to the arts. Deadline for this is 31st of August. Hounslow Council has got something called the Discretionary Business Support Grant for any businesses which have not been able to get any other funding available. So there's more information on the slide there if you think you're eligible. So something called Grants Online has got a regularly updated list of funding opportunities. So there's a link there, it's updated every week. There's something called Charity Excellence. If you sign up to that, yeah, you can search for funders. In terms of yeah, there's a link there to core costs. If you go to our website, you can find updated information about funding opportunities. We've also got a specific COVID-19 funding opportunity page. Yeah, I do a regular renew, so let me know if you're not on that and I can add you to it. It's also got funding information in it. We've got a special session next Wednesday. We've got senior people from the council who are interested to find out how they can work in partnership with the voluntary sector to look at sort of recovery from COVID-19. So you can sign up to that. It's going to be on Zoom on the next Wednesday, 29th July at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then on the 2nd of September, we've got a session on HR on Wednesday, 2nd of September. And like I said, you can always get in touch with me if you need any further support, and in terms of like specific questions, feedback on funding applications. Also, my mobile number is there as well. Anybody got any questions?
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Yeah, I have two questions. My first question is about measurable outcome. How we can write those measurable outcome, because as I saw in one of your slides, you said that beneficiaries have greater self-confidence.
Yeah.
So how I can measure that self-confidence? Because in measurable outcomes, we have to mention the quantity, kind of the number. So how we can put that in self-confidence?
Yeah, so with self-confidence, obviously that's not so much of a, it's quite qualitative in terms of like, you know, it's quite subjective. So you could say, there's, like I said, mentioned, there's something called the Edinburgh Warwick Wellbeing Scale. I can send you the link. And basically you can get them to take a questionnaire at the beginning of the project, and then at the end, and then they can, you know, that's a measure way through the questionnaire. You can actually, you know, measure it that way. You can also, like I said, just use case studies, so you can just ask them and sort of say, you know, either like a video testimonial, where you ask them how you feel you're benefiting.
Yeah, true. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but my question is about the outcome. How we can mention it? It's not about need, you know, because in need we know we do consultation, we do surveys, and then we mention. But in the outcome section, how we can measure this self-confidence?
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. What you can do is you can get them to do a questionnaire at the beginning of the project, and then at the end of the project, and that way you're measuring the difference.
Okay.
Likewise, you can also with a case study, so you can ask them, oh, how did you feel you benefited from the project? And then that would be more like where they give you a bit more detail about how they feel they benefited. So even though it's not objective, in a sense, it's them giving their own subjective opinion, there's still evidence of how they feel they benefited. Likewise, you can also have evidence of how you have watched them and you've noted how they've improved their confidence. So you, as a person who's involved in, or someone else who's involved in delivering the project, they can also use that as evidence. So there's evidence in terms of like evidence of the need before the project starts. Then there's also the evidence in terms of the monitoring to measure the change. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Something like the Edinburgh Warwick Wellbeing Questionnaire is a classic one, but there are lots of other questionnaires available in terms of measuring things like confidence, well-being, which you can use. But just make sure, just say you will do it at the beginning of the project, and you'll do it at the end of the project, and that way, that's one clear way of measuring the difference that the project is making.
Yeah, can I come back?
Yeah.
I've got two questions. Mostly this volunteer organization group, they do have the one-day event. So is that any charity or any funder that's you know, provide the grant for this sort of event?
Yeah, well, that's where you have to look at the eligibility. So like I said, the National Lottery will definitely fund one-off events.
Okay.
Likewise, I think the council will fund up to a certain amount. They put a limit, I think, on how much they'll fund. But that's another issue where you just have to check with the funder as to whether it's something they will do or not.
Okay, thank you. Other one is, you know, in our area is suffering from the religious organization, because there are a lot of grants that who are not funding for the religious organization, but you know, they are suffering because of this coronavirus. They are shut down, and then business is gone. So that's why they need some sort of help, but there is not help available for these religious organizations. Is that any way, or is that any idea that you have, then you could circulate to us, and then I can forward it to the religious organization who are looking for this sort of help, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue with sometimes with religious organizations is if you, when you make your application, if you say you're only going to help people, say from a particular religious background or religious affinity, that means that the funder might say, well, you know, you have to fund a wider, it's too restrictive in terms of who you're willing to fund. I think sometimes that can be an issue, but then there are other funders that will fund religious organizations, but yeah, it's something I can look into and get back to you on.
Yeah, or you can send us by email later on, you know, so you don't need to do it right now.
Yeah, I'm just making a note so I remember to send you.
Oh, okay, all right.
I mean, I think there's sometimes, what I've noticed with some faith groups is that they tend to rely a lot on their members.
Yeah, that's right.
So sometimes they're able to survive that way rather than getting grant funding. But I'll definitely get in touch with the council in terms of the Thriving Communities Fund, like Ellie or Michelle, and see what they have to say as to whether there's restrictions in terms of faith groups applying to the Thriving Communities Fund.
Okay. I think that's all from my side. And then just the last one is, you're gonna send us the briefing note, what you have briefed today, yeah, for everybody else.
Yeah, I'll send both sets of slides. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's all, Ian. Thank you very much. And I have to leave now.
Thanks for coming. Thanks.
Okay. Cheers. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Ian,
Yeah.
can we have a sample of a templates of evaluation form, what it looks like, what questions we should include, which are the vital questions to include in the beginning and at the end, please.
Sorry, can you just say that again?
Can we have a sample of a templates
Yeah.
of questions? They're like evaluation forms templates as a samples, so we can create our own from there.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of, I mean, the funder will probably, the funder would probably have its own monitoring. You're talking about like monitoring reports.
If we get a funding as an organization,
Yeah.
and we want to evaluate the project in the beginning and at the end, so I'm looking for like a sample templates, or if any other organization has used that we can circulate.
I have done training on evaluation in the past. I think I'm going to.
Yeah, that will be a really great help.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get back to, I think, doing a bit more. Obviously, the training programs was disrupted a bit by COVID-19.
Yeah,
seems to be able to do things on Zoom. So we'll definitely be arranging sort of training on, you know, evaluation.
Yeah, we do need all that. Yeah, that will be a great help for us, charities, to progress in successful ways.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions? People left now. Okay, well, thanks for turning up, and yeah, hopefully you can come next week to our session on Wednesday.
Yeah, definitely. I'll come again. Thank you very much. It was quite informative. Uh, as they're getting a bit longer, start falling asleep. I don't know about other people, but I felt it was quite a long session. And
Yeah, I mean, the
I
thing is
was,
that what I'm trying to do is I was trying to combine the
yeah,
training I've done
yeah.
on funding with
No, I can
the
understand. Yeah,
with the I think maybe I'll try and keep it to like an hour max, because obviously, yeah, I think once you go beyond an hour, it gets a
yeah. If
little
it's
bit long.
about an hour or an hour and a half, it's okay. If it gets too long, people, start leaving early as well. And start falling asleep as well, or if there's a break in between, we can grab a cup of tea or something like that. I mean, like today I've got 3 meetings today, so you can imagine how I'm gonna feel at the end of the day, you
Yeah,
know. Yeah, so if any of the meeting is too long, then it does get too much. Sorry about that.
yeah,
We
yeah. There's a
only
lot of
Yeah, I've got 3 meetings today, 1.5 hour, then 2 hour this one, then will be 2 hours the last one. I've took about 5-6 hours of a day already for
yeah,
just the meetings, then it's too much.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
Well,
we
I'll
will,
definitely try and keep it. I'll try and keep it down
yeah,
to like
please.
an hour max. I think.
Just a feedback, I'm not complaining, it's just a feedback.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much
Anyway, yeah.
again.
Thanks for coming, and
Yeah, I'm always there for you, for any time you deliver anything, you know that, unless I
yeah,
don't get the Zoom link.
with the funding application, did you submit it then? I
Yeah,
think I
I
asked you.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I did ask my son to go online and copy and paste everything online with the National Lottery.
Oh, yeah.
And then Thriving Community Funds were very similar. So what I did, I fill up the Thriving Community Funds and send it off as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've done both of them. And will you be sending the slide today to us, what you were showing us about the funds?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to send it tonight?
Yeah, yeah. I'll try and do it now. Yeah.
Because the deadlines are quite soon. So if we need to look into something, another thing I was looking for in Cranford Park, where is my allotment, I've seen the little children playing around football. So I'm hoping to give them a chance to build up their team, and also through the charity, through the funding, provide them some refreshments and all that, and find a team leader who can lead to it. So I'm trying to organize that. So hopefully I can apply for some funding for the youngsters, and it's going to be like a family football thing. So
Yeah.
at least the school children can enjoy for next 6 weeks, 8 weeks now before they go back to school.
Yeah.
Yeah, then still we never know what the situation gonna be in September.
No, no, it's all changing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's changing every month. Never know what it's gonna be like. And plus, people are really scared to come out. I mean, I find it really difficult for getting people out now, because the elder people, 60s, 50s, they are really scared to come out now.
Mm.
Well, I've seen many ladies, they haven't come out at all, because I contact people
I
on
think the issue is
regular basis.
how many people do they live with?
Sometimes only one, sometimes alone, only themselves. I have suicidal crime victim mother. She doesn't come out at all from last 2 years. I just provide everything to send her to send the food, fresh food, cooked food, shopping vouchers to her house. Now her
Mm.
fridge is broken down, so I'm gonna apply to the Skinner's people that if we can buy her a fridge freezer, so at least she'll have a bit of a quality of a food in the house to keep.
Yeah.
Yeah, There's so many, because we are so much in touch with the community, so we know what the needs are, what the desperation is. And today I have a lady with a knife crime victim. She's got children, 3 children, no husband. So today I gave her some cooked food and some 50-pound vouchers of Tesco, and she really appreciated that. So I'm also getting her to get acupuncture done, so her mental state can be improved. So if I've got a funding for, just want to ask you a question. If I've got a funding for her for the community food and household items, I can't pay for her treatment, can I, for acupuncture treatment?
No, I mean, you can only spend it in what you've said you will.
All right,
You have to
okay.
do what the grant,
Okay,
what the grant said you
that's
spend it.
fine. That's fine. I have applied another funding. I will ask the funders before I spend it. I will ask the funders, can I get the treatment done for this lady? Because I know her needs are and her desperation, and she needs to get better. I even gonna drive her, take her to Slough and get a treatment done and bring her back, because she's not capable to drive long journeys. She's only few roads away from me, but she came to my house. Luckily, she goes today is the first time she came out from the house, because I offer her money and food, so she came to collect it. See, my food is becoming popular, Ian. You haven't tasted it yet. Yesterday, last week, my son said 6 of his friends are waiting for the food I cook. It's the sweet dish I make. He said 6 of them are waiting for the food. This morning I was cooking for him for breakfast. He goes, can I take some for my friends as well? I said, don't worry, just take it. It's all right. So this is the way, I mean, it's lovely. I mean, I'm enjoying it, rather being a lockdown, staying in the house, at least it's giving me something to do.
Yeah, sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, plus we in the allotment we are growing green peas as well. So this is the first year we're growing green peas. So in winter, a lot of people will have a fresh green peas full of flavor to eat them as well. Yeah. So hopefully if it's open up, the lockdown open up, I'll bring you some food as well.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. But yeah, nice to speak to you. And
yeah, thank you, Ian, very much. But this search thing, if you can have a longer session for 2 hours, we want to practice the search with our laptops while you are teaching us. That will help us to just to build a confidence and where to look for. Because sometimes I open up like Waitrose grant, and they said community matters, I think, was it Waitrose, some community. I've tried. When I called them, they said you got to register with Safer Food, and the Safer Food can be donation as well. The Safer Food can be so many different things. So we need to learn to spot on where to collect, where to click for not making mistake. So I can, because the brain get confused easily, because when it's a new thing, you don't know where to click. So if we do 1 or 2 sessions together, the other people, I don't know about them, but this is my need. If I can do 1 or 2 sessions together, hopefully that'll help me to build up the confidence. Yeah. So I know you are tired now. I know you are tired.
Yeah, I've done too much talking.
I know it's tiring when you have to do a lot of talking. I know it's very tiring. For last 3 days, no, last week, Thursday till Tuesday, I was reading a holy book in the lady who's total disabled. She had a brain operation last year. and she just recovered. She goes, can you read my holy book again and complete it so we can finish it off? I was going there an hour and a half every day. I was reading there. When I come home, my head is tired as anything because I had to read aloud. Like yourself, you have to talk aloud. It really drains your brain out. You know, so I know the feelings. You need to just have a cup of tea and close your eyes for half an hour to gain your energy back. To get your energy back, it's not easy. I know it's really hard work. I don't know how you people coping with it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know,
Like I say,
I did fill up some survey with the council. They're asking for, I think it's a council. Yeah, they're asking how do you think your department helping us? I said they are excellent. You know how much the work, the effort they put into it. We can see if we want them for 2 hours, they are working for 2 hours. If we want them for 1 hour, they're working for 1 hour. It's so your work is so demanding because everybody have their own needs and demands from you and expectations. You know, I know it's hard work. Go on, have a little rest.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care. God bless you.
Yeah,
God
thanks.
bless you.
Bye.